All right, as per usual, here again with another track breakdown for this last release, if you want it. Before jumping into the Ableton project, I just want to remind people that merch is officially on sale. We have Otherwise Fine sweaters, hats, t-shirts, long sleeves, shop.otherwisefine.com. Check it out. But let's jump into the Ableton project. All right, so this is an earlier project file of If You Want It, dating back to about May of this year. I've mentioned in previous track breakdowns that a lot of times I like to stem out my buses as I go. This forces me to commit to ideas early, which allows me to finish songs, and it also makes the production workflow a little cleaner. So this is one of the later project files before I started stemming things out. Now, the reason I wanted to pull this up was to show a few things. The first is actually how this track started. So this track was started just by playing with a sample pack from Adam. I will link the sample pack below. Highly recommend grabbing it. He put it out for like $1. Go support it. Donate more than $1 if you can. It really is a great pack. So I was playing around with some samples out of this, and I kind of latched on to this one sample, which is this kind of this bell sound in this kind of 16th rhythm. And so yeah, I like the idea of just looping one bar of it over and over, so it's the same kind of notes droning on. Then just with some EQ and a little bit of RX7 to get rid of the click every time it loops over, instead of going through and adding the fades myself. You get this kind of nice little tape sounding loop. And then on top of that, added some pads drowned in some reverb and delay. And then to go with the rhythm, something you can do in Ableton is if you go into a clip and you put it to beats mode, you can actually change the tail of a clip. So it gets this kind of almost staccato effect. So I took this kind of drone that builds, and I added, or I took away some of the tail to give it kind of, again, like a 16th rhythm to it, to match this initial whatever I called Adam Beef. So they kind of like play in the left and the right ear. So that was kind of like this spacious bed upon which the rest of the track was built. Now to that, I added a reverse guitar. So I just took my Jazzmaster DI through console, and this is what it sounds like without any effects. Tossing that through Valhalla with some EQ and some saturation. Almost starts to sound like a choir. And I liked how with the rest of that kind of melodic bed, it gave it some motion and a little bit of dynamics. So that was essentially the start of the track. So normally the next thing I'll do with the track, once I kind of have that initial emotion, the feeling that I want, is I'll write some chords to it. So for this one, because the track was so spacious already, I wanted to have something slow. So I just whipped up Diva, made a quick patch with a really slow attack, and then wrote some chords. And that was essentially the base for the rest of the track. In terms of the synths, nothing too special going on, just a Diva patch that I'm running through UAD Galaxy Tape Echo. I find that gives it a lot of analog warmth in the low mids. Then I have this kind of ARP, which is just an operator patch running through some tape saturation, as well as Echo Boy and Soothe, because it was quite sharp, almost in a bit crushy way. So yeah, that's something that I added just to fill out the kind of sparkles in the high end. But I think in the mix phase, I essentially I may have taken it out. I have to go back and listen because it was just adding a bit too much busyness in that top end. In addition to that main diva, on the choruses, there's this Rufus patch that I've talked about in past breakdowns, which is essentially just a serum patch that's modeled after the Interbloom synth from Rufus, with a super saw and kind of a top line from Diva. So nothing too complicated going on in the synths there. As for the guitar, there's a ton of guitar tracks in here. I was messing around and noodling for a while before settling down on the melody. Essentially, the main tracks that aren't muted are just that melody. Again, just my Jazzmaster going through console, adding some tape saturation, some golf os, and some delay. And then the chords. Again, just a little bit of delay, some golf os, some EQ. Now, the one thing I'll say is on the kind of second pre-chorus section, there's another guitar melody that comes in, which is actually chopped from an OTR guitar sample. I'd re-recorded this myself, but there's something a way that it was when I was chopping it, the way those fades of notes go together, I really liked the tone of the initial sample. So yeah, I tried to layer it with my own guitar just to give it a little bit more consistency with the rest of the track. But yeah, there's something about that initial tone of the initial sample that I liked, so I kept it in there. This is actually a cut that I had something in pretty into the final production that was going to be on that last kind of pre-chorus. Was this kind of like B melody, but again, ultimately decided to cut it just because the track didn't need it. But yeah, so those are the guitar parts that stuck. A lot of, like I said, random ideas that I ended up cutting. Speaking of random ideas I ended up cutting, this is something that I only came across today when looking over the old project file. So this is a random vocal melody that I guess I'd come up with and then tossed through a bunch of auto-tune, Alter Boy, Valhalla, and Reverb. But yeah, this is deleted scenes of If You Want It. So yeah, this is something I do a lot when producing, is I will go through and kind of mumble half-baked lyrics, trying to find potential melodies. Now, luckily, I think it was for the best that I ended up going with some samples instead of whatever that would have been. But yeah, an interesting look into the process is a lot of times the first project file of any new track will have a lot of this, just my vocal with a bunch of really awful top line ideas that usually either will inform a little melody here or there that will get worked into maybe a synth or piano, or will just get cut and never see the light of day. So that's a little exclusive for anyone sitting through this breakdown. Now, in terms of actual vocal, so there's two vocals that made the cut of the final track. The first being this kind of little vocal moment that goes throughout the track. Now, in earlier versions of the mixdown, this was a little louder in the mix. Ultimately, I decided to bring it down in the final mixdown, and this is just one of those kind of initial vocal ideas. Again, just me singing through this mic, like I'm talking right here, no vocal booth, no nothing, running through a ton of Alter Boy, auto-tune, reverb, a bunch of effects, delay, more reverb. Yeah, and that's kind of just like adding, again, almost this background melody that kind of goes with the audio effects. So not meant to be something your ear latches onto, but to kind of be more ear candy in the production. Now, as for the actual vocal, the main vocal is just a splice sample chopped up and then repitched. And then with some, again, this is tape cassette, the cassette simulation by Oversampled. So yeah, Adam actually turned me on to this. It was $30 or something when I grabbed it. I don't know if it was a sale, if it's always that cheap. It's not a bad little tape saturation plugin, but the vocal sample itself felt a little lo-fi, like it already is kind of breathy and thin, and I really wanted to play up that. So again, the tape saturation or the cassette simulation, then super fast 30-second dot delay to give it kind of a slap back, then an 1/8 delay to actually give it an echo, going through some EQ, and then soothe at the end because it was super harsh with the distortion. Gave this kind of gritty lo-fi effect. So that's kind of the A melody, if you will, or the A section. And then there's a bit of a response. Again, just taking it, running it through a similar processing of delay, EQ, with that cassette simulation. And that's just a different sample from the same pack, again, chopped up to give the kind of response. So for me, that kind of initial slapback of the delay is really important to make it feel like it's a little bit, again, more vintage, which is something that I generally don't try to do so explicitly. With this track, it really felt like it fit. So yeah, the two vocals playing off each other sound like this. As for the rest of the track, nothing too special going on in the pianos. The piano is just kind of my basic Imagiro Native Instrument Giant stack that I like to use, doing a reverse. The one thing I did this time is I actually did 2 different reverses and panned them slightly left and slightly right, just to give a little bit more space. And then, so you can kind of hear them giving a little bit more stereo on that reverse if you listen subtly. And then on the breaks, there's the piano arp. So the piano arp, I believe is Imagiro. Yeah. Piano, and then stacked a little bit with Alicia Keys. I like Alicia Keys for anything that needs kind of something a little more transient to cut through the mix. So it worked well to kind of have the key sound from the Imagiro piano, and then the more transient attack from the Alicia Keys piano. The other thing to talk about is the drums. So the drums for this are just programmed drums. I really tried to give the sense of some realism to the hi-hat pattern. I essentially have this kind of 16th pattern that goes steady throughout, but then I'm layering it with the same samples, just automated for volume, to give the feel and the groove. So instead of having an automation lane on this, changing the volume of each hit, I'm essentially doubling up on sub hits to make those hits louder. So the single 16th on its own is literally just kind of 16th going over and over. But then when you layer it with the other kind of softer hats, which I called them, you kind of get all the groove and almost like the ghost notes of the hi-hat. speaking of ghost notes, for the snare, so the snare is across a few different layers in order to give it kind of that backbeat. So the clap on the 2 and 4 is to ground it, and then just a bunch of different snares to give the feel of ghost notes, which are going to sound different depending on if you're kind of hitting them on the upstroke or the downstroke. So yeah, that's more or less just the drum groove right there. A few different elements come in through the track, like this secondary clap and open hi-hat on that kind of 4 on the floor little last pre-chorus. That's actually a hand clap studio. And then some open hi-hats, and then the groove stays the same on the last chorus. Don't think anything was added other than just that hand clap studio clap, just to thicken up the claps on that last chorus there. Now, the other thing to note in this project file is it took me forever to find a kick for this track. I think I forget. It may have been in a later project file that I changed the kick again. At one point, I was layering several different kicks, try to get like the top kick to sound acoustic the way I wanted it to, but the bottom of the kick to still have some like round and some punch to it. That was a big thing with this track, is I really wanted the drums to sound acoustic, but I wanted them to kind of still have the punch and fullness that a electric drums sound would have on a track like this. And that was a lot of time spent on this track was finding the right kick. Ultimately it may have been a layer of 1 or 2 of these or 3 of these. I genuinely forget. As you can see, at this time I was trying out a lot. I was trying out some EQ, some Pultec to give the Pultec trick, which is essentially boosting and attenuating lower frequencies in the kick to kind of like give it a little bit of punch around like maybe like 60 hertz. Some compression, Transient Designer, virtual tape. I was doing everything I could to play around with trying to gel 2 or 3 of these kicks together. Pro tip, just find a better sample. I spent way too much time with this, and to be honest, I genuinely don't know what the end result was. This is essentially, if you want it in the early days, I will pull up the final mixdown project just in case there's anything interesting to look over in that. But I think this is about covers the kind of start of the track, if you will. All right, so this is the final mixing project for If You Want It. Now, the one thing you'll notice is everything for the most part is stemmed out. So I have the vocal pad as one stem. I have all of those audio effects from the previous project file mixed down to one stem. I have the piano mixed down to one stem. Same with the bass and the orchestra. So I didn't go over those yet, but essentially the orchestra is just some native instruments, strings and brass. And then for the bass, just the Arturia Prophet, as well as a sine sub-oscillator, and then maybe a Reese on the verses, or probably just the Prophet on this one. Yeah, so that's just the Prophet going throughout the track. Now, one little part that I forgot to mention in the guitar is there's this one little kind of riff that I just soaked in reverb that I tossed in the back of the guitar kind of melody as a little bit of ear candy that I'm not sure if anyone picked up on. It's this moment right here. That little from one ear to the other. I don't know why. I really like that little. It was like that was like a 11th hour addition, and I really dig it. And then again, the kick, whatever combination of kicks I was using, got consolidated down to a single kick, just with some EQ, and then a ton of volume automation for the different sections. Have a really bad habit of just turning off and on the volume automation that I want in a certain section, rather than drawing in the automation. I'll just add another utility, set it to the plus minus that I want, and then just off on it. I don't know if that's smart or dumb, but I like to do that. Again, just some kind of simple EQ and volume automation for the final drums, adding some effects, and then references. So one thing for this track I will mention is that the mix sound for this track was very tough. The initial kind of demo I had produced was super dark, which had definitely an aesthetic to it. But when A/Bing it against other tracks, it was clearly too dark and muddy. So to try to find a balance between the initial aesthetic of that original demo, while making it kind of bright and clear, and again getting it up to the volume and overall fullness to compete with other tracks, was a really tough balancing act. So throughout the final mixing stages, it was constantly going back to the original demo, and then comparing whether or not I was making improvements or if I was taking away. So again, like this was the very first bounce of the very first initial idea. Versus something from what would be July 14th. Going back. And so, to my ears at least, massive improvement compared to that original demo, while still retaining a lot of the qualities of that kind of darker, more lo-fi aesthetic. But yeah, that about covers this project. My apologies if this breakdown was a little all over the place today. It is a lazy Sunday here, and I just wanted to film something and put it out. So if there's anything that I missed that you guys have questions on, leave it in the comments, or just head over to Otherwise Fine on Instagram. Shoot me a message. Always happy to try to answer any production questions. Anyways, thanks again for streaming. If you want it, reminder, merch, otherwisefine.com. And that's it for this one. Catch you on the next one.